One thing I've learned in the history of 25 years of trading is that
Today I sit down with 25-year trading veteran Gareth Soloway.
And so what we are seeing is Bitcoin is pulling back here. And what I think is fascinating is that
as he shares his short-term outlook for the Bitcoin price, as well as long-term outlook into 2025. Watch today's whole video as Gareth also shares his 2025 Ethereum prediction. Click the like button right now to support me. And let's start. Gareth, remind us, what is your experience with trading?
Yeah, sure. So I've been trading since 1999. Ages, gives my age away a little bit there, but basically I started out just being fascinated by the dot-com bubble. It was incredible. I didn't have any money back then, and so I kind of played around with fake accounts, and it was just incredible to watch how much you could grow a fake account or a paper trading account. And it kind of addicted me to trading, and to the point where I said, hey, I got to learn how to do this. I spent years losing money, as most traders do, because you do everything wrong. Slowly, I learned. I had to work 3 side jobs to just replenish my trading account, to be honest, once I was getting started. But over time, I started to learn that charts were the true way to figure out shorter term moves. It shows you what the most probable outcome is. And as long as you play it, you essentially become the casino versus the gambler. And that's really what I've done now for the last 20 years or so. So that's really the background there. I ran inthemoneystocks.com for years, which is stocks. And then I branched into crypto and have verifiedinvesting.com now.
How much would you say market sentiment or just narrative affects markets? And then what is the sentiment this week?
Yeah, so in crypto, sentiment is huge because it's a very emotional market. So crypto is a majority, and it's slowly changing, but it's been a majority of retail investors. And so emotion runs higher versus in the stock market, you have these mega institutions, pension funds, and they'll ground a market so it doesn't have crazy, crazy moves. But there's no doubt that sentiment is very, very key. And one of the things I will just say is that over the last week, especially just the last few days, in the crypto markets, when you start to see some of these crazy moves, like a 600% move in XLM, or Cardano moving 300-400%, these are things that as a trader, you start to pay attention to because they usually occur at the end of moves versus the beginning, right? And so as an investor, as a trader, I start to pay attention. I start to look for opportunities in the short term for pullbacks.
Interesting. End of moves. Is that kind of like saying, like when you get a fish out of the pond and it's the dead flap, it's like the final few flaps before it goes dead. Is that right?
That's something I like the analogy there. It's essentially like, so money in markets tends to gravitate in uncertain times towards best of breed, right? So whether it's Apple stock or Bitcoin, those will be the first ones to go. When it gets so easy that money starts flowing to like the crap coins, if you will, that's where people are just at that point pure gambling, and it's showing that there's no real kind of investigation or knowledge being used. It's just like, hey, I'm gambling, let's try this, and this, and people are making crazy amounts of money. And historically, that was the high of the dot-com bubble. In 2021, we kind of saw that with crypto in many ways before the bear market. And I don't want anyone to think that I'm saying that we're heading into another bear market. I'm just saying, as a shorter term trader, I'm looking for a pullback from these levels or a retrace to kind of cool the jets of the crypto markets here.
Let's flip to the charts and show us outlook for Bitcoin in the short term. And as Gareth shows us the charts, a few things to note about this interview. Number one, we recorded this about 36, almost 48 hours ago. I think when the Bitcoin price was right around here. So we're still in this same range, but something to note. Number two, on Zoom, the camera for our faces, for some reason, was coming in and out, so you're not always going to see our faces. You'll always hear us. The audio is crystal clear. And number three, Gareth, before we get to long term, short term, what do you expect for Bitcoin?
Yeah, absolutely. Here, let me bring up my Bitcoin chart and take a look. And so what we are seeing is Bitcoin is pulling back here. And what I think is fascinating is that we came up as high as about 99,000 and change right up here, and we're now seeing a pullback. And just to explain what's going on here from a psychological standpoint is that you had a lot of people that were expecting last Friday, even myself, I was like, hey, I think we're going to break 100K here. And it didn't happen. And it didn't happen over the weekend. And so what you had was a lot of kind of gambling money pile in at 99,000, thinking it was going to break. And now that it hasn't broken, they're getting nervous. And now as it downticks, that kind of weak-handed investor is starting to sell, and it's causing Bitcoin to retrace. And I think that's really important because I still think it's going to break 100,000 here. I just think you have to kind of wipe out those weak hands first that kind of piled in just for that glory of watching the breakout above 100K. So right now we are pulling back. Sentiment had gotten very, very bullish. Everyone was gambling and thinking it was going to be a 100K easy break. So now you have to kind of wipe out those weak hands. Once it gets down, you'll have some support around 91, 92,000 here. My guess is it'll stabilize and then we'll start turning back up once those weak hands are kind of liquidated from the market. And I think at that point, this is interesting. At that point, I think not only do we pierce 100,000 on Bitcoin, but I think money from the altcoin moves will start to rotate into Bitcoin and push it even higher than 100K. Now, on a technical basis, this is something I discovered. It's the parallel channel that goes back to the high of 2017. So here's your bull market high of 2017. Here's your bull market high, the first high in 2021, and exactly to the high, the second high in 2021. Now, the way I tell if a line is important is I drop the parallel down. And so what we can see is this lower line is a parallel, right? So I'm taking it down, and notice how it perfectly interjects at this low and at this low. And what that tells me is that this line has credence, meaning it has power, because there's an even parallel with that kind of solidifies its importance. And so what I would expect is at some point we push back up, pierce 100,000, and we kind of go up to tag this upper level, which is right around 107 to 108. Once we get there, then I think we get the bigger correction, maybe back to 74 to 75. Now, where do I get 74 to 75 from? That's looking at this former all-time high right here that was in March. And there's inevitability where markets tend to come back to what I call the scene of the crime, right? So you had this level right here. We kind of chopped around. We bull flagged here. We broke out. And there's this tendency to come back into that level here. And then that's where, for me, that's where I'm a buyer. Like if you give me 74, 75, I will buy hand over fist, because usually what you'll do is you'll break out, retrace, and then you'll continue up much, much more sharply. So at least to kind of game it out, that's what I would expect from a technical standpoint.
And super quickly, let's just understand the charting, the expectations Gareth just laid out. Actually, first off, we were recording right around here, and notice in the short term, price did play out exactly as Gareth's charts were predicting. We fell down to around the 90 to 92 support level, shook out the weak hands. Now we bounced back, and not that we can't, chop around here for days, weeks. This can continue. This can continue. But then Gareth said he expects the Bitcoin price to climb to 108 before then correcting down to the 70s, this next support. So then my question is...
And so ultimately, you're right. There is a paradigm shift. I continue to be long-term crazy bullish on Bitcoin. I think it's going well above 150, maybe 200,000 or beyond. But I don't think that you're not going to ever get big pullbacks, right? Historically, we know Bitcoin has corrections that can be as much as 50% or greater. I think we'll get one that at least takes it back to 74 to 75.
Do you think 108 to 110, is that your 2025 cycle top expectation? Whereas 150, 200, the cycle top expectation, and 108 would be the short-term top?
Wow, that's a really good question. So I think over the next month or two, 108, 107 is my high, with a correction back to 74 to 75. By end of next year, I think there's so many things that are unknown that it's hard to predict. For instance, where is inflation? Because, we're talking about massive tariffs, which can be inflationary. We're talking about other factors. And if we start to see inflation getting out of control, and let's say Trump doesn't follow through on his Doge project with Elon Musk and cut spending, then there's, if they can bring spending down and the deficit starts to shrink, then Bitcoin as a digital gold is less valuable to me. And I'm not saying to everyone, but it's for me, it's the offset of ridiculous spending in governments and fiat currencies. So the big question is, does he come through on his pledges, or do we just see business as usual in Washington and the spending just continue and the deficit just continues to balloon? The more the deficit balloons, I think the more Bitcoin goes higher.
And if it's that perfect storm, then you can see 150 to 200 by end of next year.
Yeah, I mean, again, 200 seems really crazy, but then again, so did 100 12 months ago. So I think at least 150 is very realistic. And I think if it really gets out of control, then there's always a possible maybe by 2026 you're at 200.
And just for traders in this market, how much of the Trump inauguration on January 6th, with Trump being the Bitcoin president, do you think that could be a rally into a local top?
Yeah, I
Like
think I think in
108.
fact that's exactly what's going to happen, right? Is so investors have bought this kind of idea that Trump's going to come in here and be, so Bitcoin pro that it's just going to be amazing. But the thing is this is that markets price in expectations, right? And this goes for stocks, commodities, and crypto. And so investors are pricing in this lofty expectation that he's going to name a crypto czar, that he's going to do this, that he's going to create this reserve. And that's what they're pricing in now. So anything less would be a slight disappointment. And that's where you get that local top at 107 to 108 that actually could create that another reason, not just stock market related, but another reason, maybe a little disappointment. Maybe he doesn't move as fast as the crypto investors want, and that could bring in price.
So Gareth's short-term projection for Bitcoin into the Trump inauguration on January 6th, a run up to around 108, 110, before a correction to the 70s, and then top of cycle in 2025, 150. How about Ethereum? And by the way, anybody that wants to follow along, trade on their own, I'll put a link down below for Margex. I am in a long position right now, but do not be afraid. Add the take profits. Definitely set the stop losses. This is proper money management that everybody should be doing. Just remember, it is dangerous in a sense to keep your coins on centralized exchanges. So unless you're in an open trade, take the coins off the exchange, put them in cold storage. And is now the time to invest in altcoins. Looking at Bitcoin dominance, do you have any insights on to when altcoins might outperform Bitcoin?
Yeah, so Bitcoin dominance, this is a great chart here to take a look at. So what we have here is a beautiful parallel that we see Bitcoin hovering in here. So what this tells me here, right, is that when you see going back to 2023 June, so basically a year and a half ago, is that the highs and the lows are marked here. And notice how right up here we kept on hammering, and it kept failing. It got above and then it would come back below. And then look at where we are on Bitcoin dominance coming back in. So I think what's going to end up happening is the altcoins are still going to outperform Bitcoin in the near term, which is going to bring Bitcoin dominance down here. But then once you get down there, you have to just go back to history and say, okay, this is where we're hitting this level. We got to be a buyer back down here. So I'm just playing like as a technical trader, I'm just using this parallel to say when to buy alts and when to exit alts and buy Bitcoin.
And final question, there's an Ethereum ETF as well, meaning Wall Street investors can get some exposure to Ethereum. If Ethereum, that perfect storm happens and maybe Ethereum outperforms Bitcoin, what's your outlook for 2025 for Ethereum?
Yeah, so the key on Ethereum here on the charts is that we've been rallying up into this little level. So you can see this trend line right here, and price hit it here, was rejected. It's now hit it here again and getting rejected. If we get through this, you have resistance at 3,700, which is a trend line from your previous 52-week high here to your secondary high. If for some reason we can get through 3,700, I think then we make a run at the 4,100 level and could actually go and retest the all-time highs of 4,800. But the key here is getting through anywhere between 3,500 and 3,700. Got to get through there first. Then I think the road is much clearer and it can take off.
And a 2x, if we can clear its all-time high, that's nothing in crypto. Is that, realistically, you're a chart guy, is a 2x reasonable in a bull market?
It is reasonable. It absolutely is reasonable. And you could make a case here where if we look at this and we go back to our 2017 high, and if we just take that trend line and stretches out, that actually would be almost a 2x from here, right? You're going up to about 7,500 from about 30. In fact, it would at least be 100 move here, percent move to the upside, but that would be major resistance. The only thing I'll say, and listen, I'm more of a technical guy, so I can't say that I'm not an expert, but it does make me a little bit nervous that Ethereum has underperformed as much as it has. And I do wonder if Solana is eating some of its lunch and that there's other altcoins that are starting to kind of nip at the heels of Ethereum, and that's causing it to underperform. Doesn't mean it can't go up, 100x from here, or I should say 1x or 2x, right? But I think, again, you just have to be very aware that if there's competition like with NVIDIA, if there's more players producing these AI chips, it's going to bring down the margins on something like NVIDIA, not to bring it to stocks, but that can happen with Ethereum versus Bitcoin is the pure play of digital gold, right? That's the way to play the 21 million max coins. That's the way to play digital type gold against fiat currencies.
If you've made it this far in today's video, click subscribe. We drop one video per day, keeping you informed. Also, just announced, my brother and I will be speaking at Bitcoin conference next year in Vegas. Use code Altcoin Daily for 10% off your tickets, link down below. Ticket prices will increase as the event approaches, so link down below.